So the last few weeks, we've been doing a series on ways that hormone disruptors or endocrine disruptors are getting into your body. Today, we're moving out of the personal care products into other areas of life that these things creep in. And today we're talking about plastics. They feel neutral. It feels like that they are just convenient and normal and no big deal. But many plastic products are not chemically stable. Under the right conditions, the compounds used to make plastic hard, soft, clear, or flexible can migrate into the food and the drinks that you are putting into your body. So in this episode, we're going to talk about how that actually happens, how those chemicals get into the body, and what they do to women's hormones, and what practical changes you can make first to make this not so overwhelming. All right, let's go. So to start today, I just want to ask if you're benefiting from this series, if you could just take a couple minutes to head over to Apple Podcasts and leave me a quick 5-star written review. It helps me so much to find other women just like you who are looking for this type of content, especially Christian women who sometimes don't know where to turn to find good information. So if you can do that for me, doesn't take very much time over on Apple Podcasts, or if you don't have an Apple product, or even if you do, if you use YouTube at all, if you could go over to YouTube. Like my videos, subscribe to my channel, share videos, comment, any of those kind of things bumps me up in the algorithm and makes my content be shown to more people so I can find more people just like you. Doesn't cost you a thing, helps me a whole bunch. Today, we are switching out of personal care products. We are switching into plastics. And I know you've heard that plastics are bad news on some level, but maybe you didn't fully understand why. Maybe you didn't understand what to do about it or what this even means, how it impacts your body. So today, that's what I want to talk about. First of all, we're going to talk about what plastic actually is, because it's everywhere, right? And it seems so convenient and so useful that it's hard to imagine that it could be bad for us. But in little ways, little by little, it is impacting our health big time. Okay. It is not a solid like it seems. Yes, it is solid, chemically speaking, but I want you to understand that it is not an inert material, meaning it is not inactive. It is not just there in its state and it's never going to change. It is a polymer, which is a long chain of repeating molecules, and it is mixed with additives to give it flexibility, color, durability, and heat resistance. Okay. These ingredients include things like bisphenols, which are BPAs and BPSs you may have heard of, phthalates, as we've talked about in I think every other episode on these topics. If you have been curious about Verity Village when you've heard me talking about it here on the podcast and you've been wondering what's that all about, I have got some great news for you today, because now you can come try Verity Village for 2 days for just $2. It's like almost no commitment, right? Verity Village, Verity, by the way, means truth. Verity Village is a private community for Christian women just like you who want clarity, they want support, they want wisdom without the noise of social media or the pressure to already have it all figured out. Come read the conversations, watch the replays, and just see if this is the kind of place that you've been looking for. Just go to https://www.morriswellnessservices.com/Verity Village. That's VERITY Village, or just go down to the show notes and click the link. PFAS, which is, I'll tell you what it is in a minute. I've got it in my notes, but it's further down and I don't want to scroll and lose it. So I will tell you what that is in just a minute. Flame retardants and stabilizers. Many of these hormone disrupting chemicals are not tightly bound to the plastic. They can move. So when certain things happen to these plastics, it causes them to be free to leave the plastic and get into your body. So how does that happen? Well, there's 4 ways that happens. One way happens when you heat the plastic, because when the plastic is heated, those polymer chains that I mentioned, they loosen. So the additives can become more mobile, meaning it's easier for them to get off of the plastic and into you. So migration increases. Examples of how this happens in our regular everyday life: microwaving leftovers in plastic, or maybe not leftovers, but any product in plastic in the microwave. It's going to loosen those bonds and allow the plastics to get into your food. Leaving water bottles in a hot car and then drinking from them later. And might I add, these water bottles, these plastic bottles that we see everywhere, we don't know where they've been or how hot they've gotten sitting in the sun before they ever make it to us. So just because we keep them cold and just because we keep them out of hot cars does not mean that they haven't already been sitting somewhere where they got too hot and those plastics got into that water that you're drinking. Just something to keep in mind. Pouring hot coffee into plastic lined cups. And by the way, nearly every cup that you're going to find out anywhere, any to go cups, any of those kind of things, they are lined in plastic because that's the only way to keep the liquid from seeping out and leaking. So it's in pretty much every to go cup, there's some plastic. Okay. So keep in mind that when we're using plastic, that heat accelerates the chemical migration. The second way that these chemicals can get out and into you is through fat-soluble chemicals. Many endocrine disruptors are lipophilic or lipophilic. That means they love fat. Taking you back to your chemistry days with these terms, right? When fatty foods touch the plastic, the fat pulls the fat-soluble chemicals out of the plastic into the food, so that increases the migration of it. Storing meat in plastic is one way that this can happen. Oily leftovers in plastic or fatty leftovers in plastic, or cheese, things like cheeses wrapped in plastic. This is especially important because to your hormones, these chemicals accumulate in your body fat and they stay there. And so when it's coming off of your foods and it's getting into your body and it's being stored in fat, that is impacting your hormones in an ongoing way. It's kind of there and it doesn't really leave. Okay, just like the fat in the foods pulls the chemicals out of the plastic, the fat in your body does the same. It hangs on to it and it stays there. The third way that this can impact your body is, or excuse me, the third way that these chemicals are pulled out of the plastic and put into your body is through acid, because acid breaks down the stability. Acidic foods can increase the leaching out of the chemicals. So things like tomato sauce, things like citrus, things like vinegar-based foods, these are all acidic ingredients or acidic products that are going to pull more of those chemicals into the food that then's going into your body. Acid weakens certain plastic bonds, increasing that migration. And then the fourth way is just through time and wear, because even without heat, long storage increases the transfer of these chemicals. Scratched surfaces, scratched plastic releases more more particles than smooth. And old cloudy containers leach more. And most of us have some of those laying around, right? Or in our cabinets because you don't really think it matters, but it does. The older, more worn the plastic is, the more unstable it becomes. And then from that stage, how do we get these plastics into our body, or how do these plastics find their way into our bodies? So we're going to connect this now to how our bodies work. Once chemicals migrate into your food and drink, they enter your body through ingestion. The foods that were next to these or in these plastics, next to these chemicals that have pulled these chemicals into the foods, into the drinks, they go in through your mouth and you swallow them, and they go into your body, into your digestion, and they're stored in various places. They come in again through bottled water, things like that. Canned food, the linings of the cans have these things in them that we've been talking about, and plastic wrapped processed foods. So the convenient foods, the easy things, seems like everything is stored in plastic, right? That's where these things sneak into our foods and get into our bodies. They're then absorbed into our intestines. They then enter our bloodstream. They're processed by our liver. They bog our liver down, and then they're stored in our fat tissue. They also come in through microplastic particles. Plastic doesn't just leach chemicals, it also sheds particles. Even when we're not worried about the chemicals, we still have the plastics, which are going to leach in or shed particles into your body through other ways. Microplastics have been detected in human blood, placenta, and lung tissue. These are having long-term effects that more and more studies are showing, and they come in through contact with our skin. We don't think about that, right? We think that our skin, again, as we've talked in previous weeks, we think about it being a barrier, and to some degree it is, but with sustained contact over time, little by little, these things are going in through our skin. One big way that we're finding now that these plastics are getting into our body through the skin is through receipts. Those heat receipts, the thermal receipts, now they don't have the kind that like actually print ink on the receipts. It's a thermal process, which is pretty much all receipts now. Those are plastic, and they are putting BPAs into your skin, which are then being absorbed and stored. Also, food packaging, again, plastic gloves, all these things. Skin absorption is lower than ingestion, but it does contribute to the overall cumulative load. All right, so why does this even matter though? What do these chemicals do in our body? Well, first, things like bisphenols, BPAs, they do several things. They mimic estrogen, meaning they act like estrogen in your body. And a lot of this is going to sound so familiar because we've talked about it in other episodes, but now you're just getting it from a different product. They mimic estrogen. They bind to estrogen receptors. And what that means is that they go and take the place of what natural estrogen would be doing, but they don't do it right. And so then you've got extra estrogen that can't do its job. The receptors are being blocked so that estrogen can't get to those receptors, and it's causing hormonal signaling issues downline. Things like ovarian signaling. Think about all the issues that we have with fertility and PCOS and all these things. A lot of times that's connected to the plastics that are in our bodies that are blocking the receptors. It's also associated with insulin resistance, which we talk about a lot here, that nearly everybody has some touch of in America. They have insulin resistance has direct ties to these plastics. It's also linked to altered fetal development in various ways. As I mentioned earlier, these microplastics are being found in placentas. So if it's in the placentas, we know that it's getting to the baby because it's right there in it. On some level, we're still having our babies be impacted by these plastics. Also, phthalates. Again, we've talked about this in other weeks, but phthalates lower progesterone production. Progesterone is essential, by the way, for maintaining pregnancy. They disrupt ovulation. They are associated with PCOS patterns, and they interfere with androgen signaling. Androgens are our sex hormones. So if you've got interference with your androgen signaling, then you're going to have problems with libido and being in the mood and things like that, and things working when it's time for that to happen. And then another thing that I mentioned earlier that I told you I was going to tell you what it meant, PFAS, it's per or polyfluoroalkyl substances. Now you know why I couldn't say it earlier, because I knew some remnant of the word in my head, but I can't even pronounce it well when I'm looking straight at it. So forgive me for that. But these PFAs are man-made chemicals that are known for their durability. So they want to put them in the plastics because they make the plastic last longer. But these PFAs are persistent in fat tissue, meaning they get there and they stay there. They interfere with thyroid hormones. They are associated with metabolic dysfunction, which is related to all kinds of things that we talk about here on this show. And they have a long half-life in the body, meaning they don't break down very fast. These chemicals don't really act like poison. It's not like they get in there and you have an acute reaction. They act like hormone imposters over time. So over time, all these issues that we're blaming on our hormones, yes, it is our hormones, but it's because they're being interfered with from other things like these plastics. And why are women more vulnerable to this? Well, because women have more body fat storage. That's how God made us. We have more body fat. And so because we have more body fat, we have more place to store these plastics and these chemicals, which then are going to bog our bodies down over time. We have more hormone signaling. So if we have endocrine disruption, it's going to impact us more. We experience shifts when we're going through pregnancy and postpartum. So all of these things put us more at risk of being impacted by these plastics. Fat stored endocrine disruptors can recirculate during things like weight loss. Okay, so when you're trying to get healthier and you're getting rid of some of this fat, you are liberating some of those plastics to go other places. So sometimes that's where some of those downstream effects can happen, that we think we're getting healthier, but then we're having other issues, and we have to realize that we have a toxic burden that we have to work through. They can also cross the placenta, as I mentioned, and transfer into breast milk. Okay, not where you want these plastics to be. I'm not telling you this to cause fear. I'm telling you so that you understand how it works and so that you understand the importance of this issue. This isn't just some light thing. This is something we really need to pay attention to. So let's talk about some high impact changes, some things you can do right now that aren't that hard, little by little, that will make this a better situation for you in your homes. And I want you to know I've got a free guide for you today with this info that I'm about to share, along with some more information beyond what I'm going to share. So you can go get that in the show notes of today's episode. So we want to start where the migration risk is the highest. First, number one, you ought to be able to do this today. Stop heating anything in plastic ever. If you have food stored in plastic, take it out and put it in glass, but preferably don't store in plastic. We're going to talk about that in a second. But use glass or ceramic, and then use stainless steel for your drinks. That alone is going to make a big difference. It's going to stop that transfer of the plastics from heat. All right. Next, you want to switch to glass for your leftovers if possible. Instead of the plastic containers that you're seeing, like the Tupperware and all these different things, there's all kinds now. Gladware, all these different brands have come out with these plastic containers. Get rid of those and get you some glass containers instead. Get you some things like beeswax wraps so that you can replace plastic wrap and you can replace plastic bags. Get you mason jars. Mason jars are relatively inexpensive and you can store in them, or stainless steel. So just as you can, get rid of plastic containers altogether and replace them with glass containers. They're not all that expensive and they are very durable, and they are also going to reduce your exposure to these plastics. This next one, I'm going to put a caveat. Replace scratched nonstick pans. I'll say beyond that, just replace nonstick pans altogether if you can. Maybe one pan at a time, but especially the ones that you can feel on the bottom have any little cuts in them. Once you have those cuts, remember we talked about that increases the amount of plastics that are getting into your food. So replace those, get rid of those if they have scratches in them. Replace them with things like cast iron, glass, stainless steel, high quality ceramic coated products. Sometimes it can seem like this is like, whoa, this is a lot of money. But I will tell you, one way that I have replaced some of my things with cast iron is I don't live too far from Pigeon Forge, Sevierville, Gatlinburg. And I know a lot of people go on trips there sometimes. And there are Lodge stores there. Lodge is a very famous cast iron brand. And they have an outlet center there, like back in the back, they're seconds, the things that have maybe little flaws here and there. They are much reduced. And so sometimes you can go there and, I'll usually get maybe a piece or two each time I go to replace a piece or two that I've been using. Like this past time, we just went last weekend for a marriage retreat and I got me a wok, like a big wok. I think it was maybe 25 or 30 bucks. And so now I'm going to get rid of the wok that I did have. I got me a bigger bread pan. I always put liners to wear paper, unbleached parchment paper in my bread pans now, but I have that in case I ever needed to be able to cook on a fire and still make my bread. The cast iron can take that heat, and it does not put plastics into your food. So there's lots of ways that you can do this little by little to where it's not so cost prohibitive. Also, avoid putting hot liquids in plastic cups or cups that have plastic in them ever, because that heat is going to pull those plastics right into the coffee. Or reduce your canned foods. Those cans, again, contain bisphenols. Glass jar alternatives are going to be better, but of course, fresh is always best. It's better to not even get things in cans at all, because to be canned, a product had to be put at a high temperature in order to make it shelf stable, which means that you've already destroyed a lot of the nutrients anyway. And then on top of that, you've got plastics in it. So fresh is best. Glass, if you have to buy it in a quote canned form. And then lastly, get a water filter. A good quality water filter, not just a basic one that's actually removing a lot of things. Because if you don't filter your water, you become the filter. Your body is the filter, and the water that is coming through our systems also has plastics in it. Use stainless steel water bottles when you're going and coming. You can use glass as well, but a lot of times people don't want to use glass for when they're traveling around and stuff just because it's so breakable. But get a filter and get you a stainless steel water cup. I will put what I use in the show notes as well for the water filter. It's not as readily available. It's kind of like a Berkey, but it's not, because mine filters fluoride, which is a whole nother issue I'm not talking about today, but it filters fluoride as well as all these other chemicals that need to be removed without having to put an extra filter in. Just a little side note. You don't necessarily need a plastic-free life per se, but you need to get as much plastic out of your life as you can, and you definitely need to stop using heat in your plastic or with plastics at all. All right. All right. So what are some common objections that I've heard people say about these kind of things? Well, everything is plastic. And I mentioned that at the beginning. It does seem like everything is plastic. And so that's why I listed those places that you can focus on that are your biggest exposure points, where you're getting the most plastics into your body, and start there. That way you can control what you can control and then minimize the impact. Isn't it expensive? Well, it can be. But that's why you just do it a little bit at a time. Replace items as they wear out. So as I mentioned earlier, the pans, like if you can't afford new pans right now, start saving. And then when you start seeing that very first scratch show up, get rid of that pan, replace it with a better alternative. Maybe you replace half of your plastic storage and get you some glass containers. And then maybe in a month, get you some more. Little by little by little, you can do this. But I will also remind you that being sick is also expensive. Doctor bills are also expensive. And so sometimes we have to see that some sacrifices are needed in order to protect our health, because eventually it's going to catch up, and eventually we're going to have health problems from this if we do not take it seriously. Something else that I hear people say is it BPA banned? And yeah, in some cases it is, but it's often replaced with BPS or other ingredients, which may have similar hormonal effects. So you got to be aware of that. Just because they've taken one thing out because they've heard people are watching for it now doesn't mean that they haven't put something else. In general, if it's plastic, you need to be wary of it. Since plastics, we know, increase estrogen load, we know they increase insulin resistance, we know they interfere with the thyroid, then stubborn weight, fatigue, hormone chaos, all these things start to make more sense. It starts to really make sense why maybe we're struggling with the things that we struggle with. And I need you to understand that you cannot out supplement daily disruption to your body. I see a lot of people say, what supplement do I need for this? What supplement do I need for that? And all of those questions, while they come from a good place, they are rooted in a quick fix. You've got to understand that there is a lot going on here that has had downstream effects that can explain a lot of what we're going through. And you cannot fix the cumulative hormone disruptions by product swaps alone. At some point, you have to stop just hearing all these episodes and collecting all this information and thinking, yeah, I need to do that, I need to do that, I need to do that. You've got to start implementing a plan. Rather than being haphazard and kind of chasing 1,000 rabbit trails, you need a plan. So if you are serious about this, if you're hearing me talk about this week after week and you're like, this is a lot, I need help. I want to get healthy. I want to help my body get back where God designed it to be, back to how it's meant to work. If you're serious about restoring your metabolism, if you're serious about balancing your hormones and feeling at home in your body again, losing weight, helping clear out these pathways that have been bogged down by things like all these plastics and chemicals we've been talking about, I want you to know my one-on-one coaching is open. I do have a few spots that could get started almost immediately. I try not to take too many clients at once because I don't want to take from any of you. I want to be able to fully invest in you and make sure that you are getting the results that you want. But let me just say that my one-on-one clients are having amazing results. I just got back some follow-up labs, I should say, for a couple of my clients, and I am floored at how well they have done, how quickly their bodies have responded. And I want those kind of results for you. And so if that sounds like what you need, the link to apply is in the show notes, or you can just go to morriswellnessservices.com/application. I would love to hop on a free foundation call with you where we lay the foundation for how this would work for you, what's next, and all of those things that I know you're curious about. I want you to have the health that God meant for you to have. I want you to feel good like my clients are feeling. I have a few clients who came into working with me kind of thinking that this is just the way it was going to be. And I think it would be fair to say they had some doubts that it was even going to work. And if I could convey to you the glow that I see on their face through this audio podcast, I would. But it's obviously not a video format for all of you. Now, for some of you, it is. if you're watching on YouTube. But I just want you to know the weight that's been lifted off their shoulders, the inches they've taken off of their waists, the complete transformation metabolically that they are having. You can have that too. And so if that sounds like what you need, head down to the show notes or go to morriswellnessservices.com/apply. And otherwise, just keep applying as you can. I know that not everyone is ready for that kind of a change, for that kind of a commitment. But that doesn't mean that you can't start making little changes now. And so listen to this again if you need to. Take notes, go get the free handout and apply whatever you can, because any improvement that you can make is one small step closer to having your body work the way that God designed it to work. So think of it this way. Your kitchen is a place that is supposed to nourish your body, nourish your hormones. It's a place that you go to prepare the foods for yourself and for your family. We need to make sure that we remove anything that is going to confuse our hormones rather than nourish them. So I hope that this episode today has helped you do that. And I hope you'll join me back here next week for the next in this series.